And here we go.
Welcome to the Great Work Insights Podcast by the O.C. Tanner Institute, the show that features the people, the professionals, the thought leaders, and the coolest companies. And now your host, the man navigating the discussion about the culture, the organized chaos, and the best practices that compel great work, Todd Nordstrom.
Sometimes I wake up in the morning and ask myself if I'm making an impact, if I'm making a difference. Why would I ask this question? I was reading through some famous quotes the other day. There were quotes from my favorite president, Teddy Roosevelt, like, "It's hard to fail, but it is worse never to have tried to succeed." Or there's quotes from guys like Martin Luther King, like, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." And of course, there's also quotes from famous authors like Walt Whitman, like, "Keep your face always toward the sunshine, and shadows will fall behind you." I was thinking the other day, though, about words of wisdom I could quote from people you don't know, like this one. "Life now hurts, but somehow that doesn't take away from living." That was said by my childhood friend, Jim, who survived a life-threatening car accident. Or how about this one? "Stop being right, start being successful," which was said by my friend, Dr. Kevin Fleming. Or maybe the best quotes I can tell you or share with you on this show is, "If you really think about it, Santa is a stalker. He sees you when you're sleeping and knows when you're awake," which was said by my daughter, Lila. Words, quotes, somehow impact us all in different ways. We may consume our quotes from those who matter to us most, those who are closest to us, or we could perceive timeless quotes as words to live by. But I wondered the other day, is it getting easier or harder to find quotes and words that mean something to us all? Think about these stats I pulled from marketing research I found online. Every minute, email users send 204 million messages. Every minute, Google receives over 4 million search queries. Every minute, blog writers post 1,400 new blogs. Every minute, Facebook users share 2,460,000 pieces of content, and every minute Twitter users tweet 277,000 times. Think about the amount of information that's being created, the words that we're consuming each and every minute. My question is, how do words affect us this day and age, and whose words affect us? My guest today is a voice that is listened to. His words are consumed. His words penetrate an oversaturated space. AJ Agrawal is not only the CEO of a company called Alumnify, but he is also a frequent contributor to many of the sources we all trust for current information and quotes in the business world. AJ is a contributor to Fast Company, Huffington Post, Inc. Am I right, AJ? AJ, welcome to the show. I don't know if I'm getting your list right. You write for so many.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, Todd. The main outlets that I write for, and a lot of it has to do with exactly what you've kind of been talking about. So Forbes, Inc., Huffington Post, Entrepreneur, and several others, and it's all really related to marketing, content creation, and also how users are connecting with each other and businesses on the internet. So I really like the introduction that you gave, and I think it perfectly fits into what I covered.
But all those places you're writing, I mean, that's reaching a lot of people, right? I mean, have you ever looked at the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, so some articles can reach over 500,000 people on any single day, and I think what's interesting is not only the amount of people that are reached, but the different kinds of people that are reached as well. I've been reached out from people from Kenya, Australia, all over the world. And I think the value of that is that you get so many different perspectives on your content. And you have this amazing avenue through these outlets to communicate with so many different people, and in such an easy way. It's hard to imagine that you create one document, 750 words, in less than an hour, and 500,000 people will see that document, and a lot of them will actually contact you and start a conversation. I don't think I really expected that magnitude to come when I started writing, but it's been just an incredible journey and something that I think I didn't really appreciate until you start interacting with all these people who you never could reach before.
Well, and I want to be completely transparent about how you and I met. You read an article that me and my co-author, David Sturt, wrote on Forbes. The article was focused on millennials. And for what reason did you say, hey, I need to reach out here? What struck you?
Yeah, so, I think one of the big things that I've learned as a writer is that when you talk about your passions, when you write about things that you truly, truly are excited about, it comes out through your writing. And so when I read that article, I looked at, the meaning behind the writing. And for us in our company, Alumnify, millennial engagement is huge. It's something that universities across the country and really across the world are really struggling to learn how to engage millennials as alumni. And it's just this huge problem. So as I read that article, the first thing is that it was so informative. I could tell that you guys knew what you were talking about. And finally, you guys were really passionate about the subject. And I think the other aspect that makes you a great writer and how I've been able to expand the outlets that I've been able to write for is by constant learning. Mm-hmm. So once I can take a piece of information away from a piece that I learn about, I want to get to know the author. And I think that a lot of people don't really take that next step and reach out to the authors of these articles. Because I think a lot of them think that, when you reach out to the author, that they're going to be, bugged or they won't want to engage in a conversation. And really the exact opposite is true. I think as writers, we love when our readers reach out to us and ask us questions, etc. And so that really prompted me to reach out. I'm really glad we did, because now we're friends.
Well, it's interesting too, because it's like when you talk about people not taking that next step and figuring out who this message is coming from. It's like if you look back at some of those famous people quotes that I mentioned at the beginning of this show, immediately when you hear Martin Luther King Jr., his quotes are put into context. You know what I mean? Or Teddy Roosevelt, those quotes are put into context because you know something about his life. And so reaching out to the author puts those messages into context. I've been culling through a lot of your writing. You write a lot about trends in business, where David and I write more, I don't know what to call it, more principles of business. I'm going to ask you a tough question. What's more important? Is it trends or is it principles when you're talking about business? Your opinion.
Yeah, I think it depends on what part of the business that you're in. And so personally, I think trends is huge for anybody on the strategic level. So if you're the one who's going to make your strategic decision about marketing. So I write for the CMO network for Forbes. I think trends need to be so crucial to that, because any strategic decision that you make needs to be focused on what trends are coming. So what's really exciting for my readers on Forbes, and a lot of what I've been writing about, are trends in inbound marketing, which I think really ties into the theme that we're kind of going over today. Providing value for readers, that value in turn creates customers. Now you look back and you say, well, the old trends of outbound marketing have really ruled most businesses for a huge number of years. Things like cold calls, snail mail, emails to spam folders. And I think that today's current CMO cannot actually perform, at the top of his or her game unless they understand that new trend of inbound marketing. So I think that's one aspect that for executives, they need to know the trend, these trends. Now, with that said, I think everybody in business should have some different levels of perspectives. I think that the perspective articles that I've kind of written, and I haven't written as many as I have about trending article or trends, I think that I've noticed a huge connection that I've made with trending articles with C-level executives, because I think their job more than anybody is to stay on top of those trends. And if they're very high up in the organization, on the CEO level, it's to be able to look at those trends and then predict the trends that are coming next. So there's something that I always say about traction channels for content, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, etc., and that's the best trends that you can find are the ones that nobody knows about yet. We've seen that through tons of outlets. You're now seeing that coming up with things like virtual reality, etc. So I think that if you can predict trends before the mass market really jumps onto them, that is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest thing that CEOs and executives can really understand today.
I think you're right. And it's interesting too. It's like not only looking at the trend of what it is, but realizing even if you don't know what's coming next, know that something new is coming next, which I think is interesting too when we talk about like things like millennials. Is there's so much talk about millennials right now, but we have to know what's coming next and what those new attitudes will be, in the workplace. As a millennial, which I don't want to make myself sound too old because I'm right on the ledge of millennials and Gen X. Do you think the days of these everlasting quotes and these words that last forever, do you think they're dead?
I don't think they're dead. I think that for some of the generation of millennials, and I think you have to look at the millennial generation of how they kind of look at different things. For instance, I think that some quotes have been taken out of context. Mm-hmm. I think that some quotes have changed meaning depending on the generation. But I also think that millennials still truly appreciate some of the great quotes of all time. You look at quotes like MLK, and I think that a lot of the things that he was fighting and what he stood for are still prevalent in society today. Mm-hmm. And millennials still appreciate his words. They appreciate what he did for this country and for the world. And I think those quotes stay true. I think also that the millennial generation, the quotes that they choose to still resonate with is evidence of the power of the figures who gave them. So the fact, again, we'll go use the MLK example, the fact that MLK's quotes still ring strong for people in my generation, I think is truly, truly powerful. Same thing with Teddy Roosevelt, etc. What I will say is that I think it's important that we distinct between millennials understanding and appreciating quotes from great figures in the past, and also appreciating the fact that while they do understand those quotes, there's still a generation that's constantly trying new things. So new platforms, they're going to have their own heroes. I think that the figures today that stands out to millennials are very different than millennials than the figures in the past. But with that said, I think the millennial generation still appreciates everything those figures have done, but I also think that they're looking forward, they're trying new things, and while they still keep those quotes in mind, they're adjusting their personal meaning to themselves as they go out and they try to innovate on their own and for their own generation.
Agreed. Well, I mean, because you even look at quotes that get repeated over and over and over, from our current leaders, the Bill Gates of the world and whatnot. I want to talk to you about your company for a second. Obviously, you've created quite a following at all of these different business magazines online. How does Alumnify.com fit into the picture of what you're communicating to the world through all these business magazines?
Yeah, so the actual way that we differentiated Alumnify from the rest of our competitors and how we were able to get in these magazines was really looking at the trends that we saw in marketing. And, for those of you who don't really know the university market really, really well, alumni donations currently is the lowest that it's ever been. It's right under, I think, 9%. So what we saw is that for, years and years and years, alumni donations were pretty steady, and now today they keep dipping. And we looked at why that was when we started this company. And what we noticed was that the way that you engage alums, especially millennials, is completely different than the way that you engaged their grandparents. For instance, I remember when I was a little kid, I would, my mom would come home and she would read the mail. Or when somebody called, no matter who it was, we picked up the phone. Now there are things like caller ID. There's these amazing spam folders that Google has perfected. There's, I don't know anybody who picks up their phone anymore if they don't recognize the number. We as a society have gotten so good at blocking messages. It's never been harder to reach somebody. And actually, if you look at the amount of companies that were in the top 1,000 companies in the world, from 1983 to 1993, there's only 200 that changed. So 800 of those companies stayed the same for 10 years. So if you're a big company, you're looking amazing up to 1993. When it got to 2013, only 200 of those 800 companies were still in the top 1,000. So what that means is that the landscape was really changing. So we saw that for Alumnify and said, okay, what if we could jump on this inbound marketing trend? What if we could provide tons of value for alumni, and in turn, if they like that value, if they resonate with it, then they'll donate organically to their institution. And so where that fits in what I cover is everything's really focused about these new trends in marketing and business and startups, et cetera. And one of those major trends has been this huge focus on providing genuine content and being able to see the returns long-term rather than just focusing on short-term, building your assets through inbound marketing, et cetera. And that really is our philosophy at Alumnify. So when we work with the school, we don't try to go in there and just sell a quick product. We build a core inbound marketing strategy and implement some of those strategies into their plan so they can get alumni to actually want to donate, to pick up that phone call when the school calls them, and all that great stuff, and build a lasting brand.
Interesting. I have a question. I was listening to you explain that. A lot of the listeners to this show, they're HR leaders. A lot are managers. A lot are C-suite leaders who are trying to grasp ideas about trends and what's coming in the future, and they're trying to, like you mentioned, figure out what to do with millennials because it is new and it is changing. Can you give some perspective to the people in charge of HR, the people in charge of culture, the people in charge of hiring from a millennial perspective about what your generation wants from the workplace?
Definitely. So I think there's a couple of key factors that if people in HR are people who are trying to create a millennial-friendly culture, that they definitely need to keep in mind. The first thing is that the millennial generation is very collaborative. So people want to work in groups. The generation that I belong to, we're very vocal. It's never been easier for me to shoot out a message and reach literally thousands or millions of people like it is today. It takes less than 140 characters on Twitter. I can share things on Instagram, Facebook. So I now have the ability to actually have my voice be heard by tons and tons of people. Our generation also has a ton of power. So I think it's very important that you give the millennial generation, lots and lots of leadership opportunities. You even look at a small example like Yelp. Now with things like Yelp, I can go into a restaurant, and if I don't have an amazing experience, I can actually hurt the revenue that company is going to make. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. And then finally, I think it's very, very important that has a company culture that takes risks and allows people in their organization to not be scared to take risks. And evidence of that in the millennial generation is seen by the amount of different platforms that they're on, the risks they're taking, et cetera. I think right now, you look at different outlets like Periscope, even virtual reality that everybody's talking about. The first people that are going to buy into that is the millennial generation, because they're so used to trying new technology and adjusting to new technology. And I think older generations were a little more hesitant than the millennial generation is. So to really develop the right culture for that market, you want those people to take risks. You want to put them in leadership positions. You want them to work together, and you want to make sure that they know their voice is being heard.
It's interesting because you tell a company leader to say, hey, it's your job to allow people to take risks, and that sounds risky. But what you're saying is you're a huge generation, and you do have a lot of power. And if you don't allow people to take risks, eventually you're not going to have anyone to do anything, right?
Yeah, it's true, and I think especially if you look at companies today and markets today, every market is being disrupted. You look at the advantages that some companies had when they were the first ones to put an app in the App Store. Now, if you put an app in the App Store, the chances that you actually make it on the front page of Apple as top downloaded app is extremely, extremely low. So there is a huge, huge advantage for the companies that jumped on that trend early. Now we've seen things like virtual reality, where if you look at older generations, I think a lot of people are really scared about this idea of virtual reality, and millennials want to dive in first. And I think as a business today, unless you have that acceptance of risk, that acceptance of uncomfortability when it comes to new platforms, new trends, and I think the millennials have really, really adjusted to that very well. Unless companies have that same mindset, they're really going to suffer over the next 10 to 20 to 50 years.
You're right. And I was just scrolling through some of your other writings. You cover so many different topics, so many different trends. I think you are a voice for the future and today. If listeners want to learn more about you, read some of your work, read all of your work, where can they find you? Give us some places to find AJ.
Definitely. So I am very active on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at AJ Alumnify. Also, I get a lot of emails from readers, from every kinds of people. So please feel free to send me an email at aj@alumnify.co. I'm pretty good about responding. Those are the two main channels. Also, I'm very active on Forbes, Entrepreneur, Huffington Post, those other outlets. I try to post on them once to twice a day sometimes. So please connect with me. I love hearing from readers. I love getting feedback, and I love meeting new people and engaging in new conversations. So please reach out to me.
As you were mentioning that, I'm going to tell the audience one of the biggest differences I've seen between generations is that willingness to give out personal contact information between generations, where the older generations would say, contact my secretary. Younger millennials are saying, here's all my contact. Please reach out. And it's fascinating. But thank you so much for your time today, AJ. It was a great conversation.
Appreciate it, Todd.
Have an idea for the topic we should tackle next? Leave us a comment at www.octanner.com with your information and insights. Also, be sure to visit octanner.com for more podcasts and how you can inject great work into your organization.